Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. Dan Routledge and Dave Forrester looking back over a busy week in the British Basketball League. It's the busiest week since we've started this, Dave, so we're going to have to plow through all of these games.
Yeah, too.
We'll go back to Tuesday night. I almost forgot there was a game on Tuesday night. There were that many this weekend, but there was quite a dramatic game in the trophy. Bristol Flyers 73, Newcastle Eagles 74. And for Bristol, they start out hot. They do this all the time. They get 30 points on the board in the first quarter. Ben Mockford's knocking down shots. They get up 19 and they give it all away in the second quarter. Their second quarters this season have been really, really below average. And then once you let Newcastle back in the game, you're in trouble.
Yeah, it was a brutal loss for Bristol because it's a trophy game, so it's something to play for, which means that all they have now is to play to get into the playoffs. But the manner of it, they'd lost twice to Newcastle already. They'd been knocked out of the cup by Newcastle. They'd lost them in the league on Friday night. So, we always say it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in a row, particularly within a month, which is what Newcastle happened to do. And that was exactly how the first quarter played out. Bristol were hungry. Newcastle weren't off the bus, to be honest. Their defense was pretty appalling. They gave up shots to the wrong guys. Bristol knocked down shots, and they're up 11. And then I'm afraid Bristol basically self-combusted slowly. The game was being played in the middle of the second quarter, exactly as you say. That was a 20-point game at halftime. That game was done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It was a 6-point game at halftime. I think they gave up 11 or 12 points in the second quarter.
Yeah.
And, it was as much, for me, it was as much about temperament as it was about execution. Because Newcastle didn't even play well in that second quarter. The guards really never got going until the second half. And, but little things, Ben Mockford got a silly technical. And he got called out by his coach on his way back to the bench, and he didn't score a point after that.
No.
And that mental thing is tough. And if Josh Wilshere hadn't actually come in and made some shots off the bench, then I really think they would have struggled to even keep it that close. And then you get to the end of the game, and the end of the game is all about discipline. We've all seen most of us have seen the social media, the Desireel's clip of Lockett and Defoe in their double technical.
Yeah.
That was unnecessary. It was discipline. There was other little bits of chippiness, which I think emanated from some of the Bristol guys. Or I'd have to watch the tape back to be sure. A couple of times Del Pesh ran into people, and it just seemed like it was almost like they were seeking to assert themselves, but didn't quite know how, and they haven't won enough games to do so. So you get to the end of the game, and game's on the line basically, and it comes down to discipline. Newcastle have the ball with 6 seconds left, double timeout. Coming out of the second timeout, I think Bristol probably outthought themselves because they chose to foul. And they fouled Gordon when he was away from the basket, facing the wrong way, with Fletcher and Edwards nowhere near the basketball, having to make a play with 4 seconds to go. And what that did was that gave Newcastle the ball on the baseline. And the baseline's a hell of a lot more difficult to defend than the sideline. And they got the ball into Fletcher, and Mockford committed a dumb foul.
Yeah.
Can't see any other way around it.
Yeah.
And part of that can be because the players have been conditioned to foul, because they have fouls to give.
Yeah.
So it's always the balance. If you're conditioned to foul, then you might give up the foul at the wrong time. And they'd probably been better just playing defense on Gordon, at the beginning. And then finally they got an inbound and got the ball to Baker, and they ended up going at Gordon. At Gordon, and Gordon's Newcastle's best defender, and we've seen that now in multiple games. He's against Plymouth at the end, against Leicester at the end, against London at the end. They end up going at him, and Edwards and Defoe were in the middle, and he didn't get a reasonable shot off. So that was a brutal game. I think they carried that game into Friday.
Yeah, disappointing one, but Newcastle survive in advance, and they will play Leicester or London in the next round. So let's move on to Friday's games, and we'll start with Leicester. And I watched this game, and I'm like, this is not Leicester I'm watching. What is this up and down run and gun stuff that I'm seeing as Billy Mims come back in charge of Leicester? It was the highest scoring half that Leicester have been involved in in 11 years at 58, 57. Just a bonkers up and down game from Leicester's point of view.
Yes and no, because Leicester take good shots, and if Manchester, whose defence has been pretty appalling, give them good shots early in the shot clock, then Leicester will take them. What Leicester can't stop Manchester doing is coming down and taking whatever shot they get early in the shot clock, and Manchester did that. Now, there's no reason for Leicester to turn down good shots to slow down the game, because Manchester are still going to come up the court and shoot it like that.
Yeah. So
when we've had teams in rhythm, there've been some interesting kind of high scoring quarters down there in Leicester. It's interesting. It's really, I mean, it's more about Leicester than it is about Manchester. Manchester's defense is not anywhere near where it needs to be competitive in a game like that. It was their offense which kept them in it. But what Manchester have, particularly with Hudson and Whelan back, is that they have scorers basically in every position, probably apart from Hudson. He said so, and they also have guys who are individual scorers. An individual, whether that's Cassell's step back jump shot, whether that's Johnson attacking the rim, Brady catching the basketball, Uwande shooting the basketball, all of that stuff, and that's probably the nearest thing there is to Leicester's kryptonite, because they're based so much on solid one-on-one defense that their natural instinct is not to overhelp the Leicester guys. So if you get someone like Jordan Whelan, who's getting a step and getting to the rim and is able to finish, by the time the Leicester guys have worked out that we might need just to adjust just a little bit here, there's 50 points on the board and everybody's comfortable, and Sam Cassell's making threes from everywhere, which aren't good, they're not necessarily good shots, but they're good shots for him. And they get into that flow. So if they have a kryptonite, I'm not sure that they do. It's always been the individual guys who can go off and score, because their team defense is so good.
Well, let's spin it forward to the end of the game and say, okay, then Leicester get up 10 with 5 minutes to go. We've seen this one before, and they give it away again, just as they did against Sheffield last week. It's happened to them a few times this year where you think, oh, they've seen it off now, and somehow they let their opponents back in the game. Yeah,
and it was surprising that, but a 10-point, as you know, 100 to 90, a 10-point lead is not the same as a 70 to 60 game. Because that's the way the game has been played, and you've got guys on the Manchester team without a conscience really, and who are playing hard, playing. I'll not say playing to be seen, but they know it's a big game. They're in a nice gym against a top team. It's one of those games that you get looked at. So there's an issue. I wouldn't go as far as saying there is an issue. You'll probably slightly concerned that they didn't close that game out, because it's happened 2 or 3 times.
I think you're being kind there.
I think I'm being kind. But as I think Andrew kindly said on the telly, you can only, if you're in these close games, that can do you good.
Well, I suppose that's the upside, and the fact is they've got a guy who's quite happy in that moment and well suited to it. And it was interesting, if we go back to the last score that Leicester had in regulation, I flipped back to what you said last week on Sheffield on the inbound. They didn't deny him the ball. And what they did was they denied him the ball, thought they'd done the job, and he just went and took it straight from Nelson Henry.
That play, and what happened is, if you look at afterwards, you look at Jack Hudson and Donovan Johnson. Jack Hudson gives Donovan Johnson an unbelievable stare, because I think it's quite clear that there was a communication that they were meant to switch when the ball went into Nelson Henry, or whatever they talked about. Two of them ended up on Nelson Henry, and Crandall just boom, dunk. And that was, I'm afraid that's rather indicative of some of Manchester's defense. I've just watched a bit more of it tonight as well. But and then even at the end of the game this time, Crandall got a 15-foot jump shot to win the game. Or the last play, sorry, the last play before Cassell came down and made the shot. No, it was the last play of the game. So he had a good shot. My only thought about where Leicester are at is that, our teams who are more disciplined going to, at some point, be able to take Crandall away in some way by basically not letting him touch the basketball. You know, I think once he touches the basketball and the court is spaced, you know, you take your chances, but they're not great.
No,
because his decision making is so good. And they came out and they made shots. Like Leicester shot 16 of 32 from the 3-point line. I mean, that couldn't be an overtime game. Corey Johnson made 7 of 10. You know, I don't know who Manchester thought they were guarding. And I don't think they adapted quickly enough to the way that Manchester were making shots, and Manchester were playing like it was their biggest game of the season.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Leicester scored, I think it was the last 10 points of the game in overtime to win that by 7.
Ultimately, the team that plays the most defense does win. It just sometimes takes a bit longer.
Newcastle 94, Worcester Wolves 85. I was a bit disappointed when I watched this back because Eagles scored the first 10 points and then, you know, next thing you know, they're up 18. I was thinking, I thought Wolves would give them a better game than this, and they were a long way behind in the first half.
Yeah, they hadn't played for 3 weeks, so because of COVID. And, you know, Newcastle did what you meant to do against a team that hasn't played for 3 weeks. You jump on them and you get off to a quick start. And basically, the first half, I think Fletcher had 11 assists and Newcastle just got anything they wanted. Jordan Williams, Worcester were relatively stagnant. Everything went through Jordan Williams, which works, but it can take away from everybody else. And Jordan Williams was fine. He had 16 points. Newcastle couldn't guard him individually. But everything else became very static. Bonek wasn't moving. You know, the American guys can stand around. The spacing wasn't quite right. And what happened was in the third quarter, Matt basically, about 6 minutes to go, he decided that he'd had enough of playing with Parks and with Jordan Williams together. And he decided that he'd play with a stretch 4 the rest of the way. And that was McSwiggan or Lawson. And they made shots. I think they made about 8 threes in the third quarter because, you know, Newcastle were playing with the 2 bigs and Adenican was in the game and Defoe or Max was in foul trouble. The bigs were in foul trouble. But McSwiggan came out, made some shots. Lawson made 4 threes. And that suddenly opened the space out on the whole court for Bonek to run his screen and roll and get into the middle and throw the ball around. And Newcastle's offense became very static. And it was kind of at the point whereby they you got the impression that they thought they did enough to win. And
well,
we've seen that a few times.
We've had this conversation before. Again, it's similar with the Leicester point. Up 14 with 5 minutes to go, and Wolves got it back to, I think it was 5 at the closest point. Yeah,
and so Newcastle kind of waiting for the game to finish. Again, they played Fletcher the whole second half, which, you know, I think he fouled, apart from the fact he fouled out with 4 minutes to go. So they might have to look to get him some rest in the second half. But you know, it was. You look at those guys. That Worcester team with the 4 shooters and a centre is going to be tough because Anderson's a shooter, Kimball's a shooter, McSwiggan's a shooter. Lawson made 4 threes. Elan, who'd hardly played, as a shooter, and you get the feeling that, and obviously Jordan Williams is a load down inside, and Parks is perfectly serviceable. So that was probably a good time to play them. 3 weeks off. We'll see where they go the next few weeks. I'm still quite optimistic. I'm still quite high on them.
Right, let's move a little further south to Sheffield. Sheffield Sharks 77, Glasgow Rocks 61. First quarter of this was basically a Lillard highlight show here. He was dunking everything all over the place, and they got up 9 points in 8 minutes. And you think, oh, this is going to be a long evening for Glasgow, but Keelan got them going a bit in the second quarter. They made a few threes, and they actually had an 8-point lead at halftime. Yeah,
it's kind of the ever-changing Sheffield conundrum. I think they may have fixed it just this week. But the interesting thing about this game for me was that Nick Lewis only played 12 minutes. Changed his starting lineup again to go with Helmsley, Lillard, Nichols, Tuck in the middle as opposed to Coke, because I think he's worried that Tuck is Coke is susceptible to early fouls, and Retino. So Retino kind of supplanted Lewis in the starting lineup, and those may well be his 5 best players. You know, there's arguable maybe, but it may well be his 5 best players, and certainly seem to rejuvenate Lillard. And Lillard's been the engine of that team for the first 3 months. So, you know, he got to a point, I have to say, whereby either that happened and he rejuvenated, or he wasn't there anymore. You know, because he's clearly really, really solid player. He's clearly capable of being a high-level player in this league, but you can't have him sitting on the bench playing 12 minutes a game. You just can't. So I think the team has made the right move in basically inserting him and focusing on it. It might be due to the way that he's practicing. He may have made that determination himself that, I'm not going to let this season go now. But that was a good thing. And then that's Sheffield. Having their 5 best players start means that your bench is maybe a little bit weaker. Clearly, Nick Lewis never got into a rhythm when he played 12 minutes. Glasgow played solid basketball, as they tend to do, systematic basketball, as they tend to do. But the thing with playing systematic basketball is that eventually systems can get shut down. And in the second half, their system got shut down.
And Kipper Nichols was good for the Sharks as well, and he got them once they got in front in the second half. That was pretty. I mean,
he hadn't started in the last game either, or he hadn't finished the last game. Certainly, Lillard and Nichols spent most of the time on the bench. So I like the formation of the group. They ran more of a motion offense, which was less reliant on Helmsley to run plays. He could pass the ball, get off the ball, come back to the ball, and make plays, which I think really suits him quite well. Glasgow is just offense, just finding offense from enough spots. Particularly, I'm a broken record on this one, but the point guard spot is just so hard in this league to be consistent, particularly on the road, without consistent minutes from the point guard spot.
Yeah, kind of ran away from them at the end. 16 was probably a little harsh on them.
Yeah,
right,
one thing, it's a 16-point game in a 70-61 game.
Yeah,
61 game, so it's it's not like it's 105 to 89 and you're in with a shot. It's eventually it's one of those games where the life is being sucked out of you, and they didn't have anything to change that tempo.
Well, let's get on to the thriller in the trophy. Surrey Scorchers 101, Thames Valley Cavaliers 100. And we could talk about the game, and I'll let you go for it if you want to, but I just want to talk about the last 40 seconds, really, because I'm watching this game back, bearing in mind that I had the StatCast on while I was broadcasting on Friday, and I saw the play-by-play as it came in, so I knew exactly what was coming up. And yet, when Scorchers miss and they get the rebound, the Cavaliers, with 43 seconds to go, up 5, I'm like, they cannot lose this game. It is not possible to lose the game from here. And then I don't know where Hakeem Silva was going, because once he crosses the halfway line, just stop. They're going to have to foul you. Just stop. Run the clock if you take a few seconds. But he kept pushing it, poked away from behind, and then they go down and Cam hits a 4-point play. Again, why are you jumping underneath the shooter? And then they come down and it's an even worse turnover the next time down.
Yeah, it's experience, isn't it? You have to know the game. I mean, it basically ended up as being a game whereby the last team to have the ball won. 101 to 100. They couldn't, Surrey couldn't stop Thames Valley. Thames Valley really couldn't stop Surrey. But you're right. I mean, you can't lose that game from that position. You talk about 2 turnovers. You talk about the mental mistake of fouling. You then make a play and throw it to Kai Williams, who throws it back to Johnson and makes a tough shot. 4 seconds to go, and even with 4 seconds to go, Guy gets the ball on the baseline and you let him get to the middle. The
guy you've already played twice this season.
Yeah, you've already played twice this season. And you've got to get on his top side. You get on his top side, you can use the baseline as another defender. You take away his options. At that point, he cannot get to within 6 feet of the rim on his own to make a play. That can't happen. He made a play. Credit to him, it was a tough play, but he's 6 feet from the rim. And that is they have to be better than that defensively. So you would probably have to say that. Ultimately, Hildreth made plays, which meant that Surrey won the game.
Yeah.
As much as Thames Valley lost the game.
Yeah.
But particularly, I know the first turnover was bad, but the second one, when you're up and there's less than 24 on the clock, and they're going to have to foul you, to throw a pass like that when there's nobody actually near you.
No.
It was just there's no one actually close to you to foul. You didn't need to throw it. Just experience and and turnovers and that type of pressure.
The interesting thing I thought coming out of that is, yes, I mean, obviously there's a lot of buzz around Hildreth, has been for the last couple of years, and everybody's excited to see what he's going to do. But he's just come into the team. He's practiced however many times he's practiced. He's played really well, 22, 5 and 4. But there didn't seem to be any question that he was the number one option on that inbound pass.
Yeah, well, Hicks has been fouled out, so Hicks was out of the game. And I think Hicks would probably, even now moving forward with them, Hicks will be their main guy. But the cut was to get it. His cut was to get the basketball in the spot where he wanted it. Wanted to look at the other guys on the court. There was a centre on the court. There was Theo on the court. There was the inbounder on the court, and it might have been Walsh or Kaelin on the court. Well, the most capable guy to get his own shot. Hildreth, let's be blunt, to get his own shot. Yeah. And to be fair, that's the way he's been playing at Worthing for the last 18 months. He's been the main ball handler. He's created a lot of offense for himself, and he's been in that situation. So it's a great call it's a good call by Creon to get there. I don't think it's a kind of a major curveball. I think. Well,
no, it's just having just come into the team, the way everybody went, that's him. There.
Well, the one thing I'll say about them, and then it moves on to the next game as well, is that their chemistry is so much better.
Yeah,
their chemistry, not necessarily due to him, but just to all the steps and all the moves that they've made. You could just see the release and almost like they were enjoying playing and with each other and supporting each other. And it probably doesn't harm it that, firstly, they've lost a couple of guys who may have been weighing them down. Then they were short-handed because Hicks fouled out. They were short-handed because Richards didn't play much. And Hildreth actually is one of their better defenders, probably their best defender on Saturday night. I don't really watch as much on Friday night. But he was certainly, he kind of has that competitive streak in him.
Yeah,
which you can really see, and they've missed a competitive streak all season. They've missed it, terribly. So it was more encouraging. Not that they won, because to be honest, they have to win that game by 15 points. But that the way that they played.
Yeah, I'm sure Thames Valley cannot believe they went and they lost another game late on
I watched the end of that game as well. They went Newcastle University went on a 16-0 run.
That's what Newcastle do, though, isn't it?
Well, maybe. But
anyway, let's get back to the BBL. The TV game: Plymouth 87, Bristol 65, and rinse and repeat here. Flyers second quarter struggles, and I think at times they settle for bad shots as well. In that, that aren't their natural shots, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, they don't score enough points, and that's probably one of the reasons. I don't see much togetherness with them at the moment. Obviously, it's hard when you've lost 5 games in a row. That's a game on Sky against your Court Mox, local rivals, and you didn't really, even when they came back in the third quarter, you didn't. I thought I saw a lot of guys who were kind of in their own heads. With the way they were playing, it seems to me that at some point Andreas has to bite the bullet and start Josh Wilshere. Josh Wilshere is a guy he brought in to be the point guard at the beginning of the season. The game is easier with him now. Having said that, they're starting quite well. I appreciate that they're putting points on the board in the first quarter. But just in relation to the cadence and the rhythm of the game, I don't think Wilshere is suited to coming off the bench at all. He can make plays off the bench, but I think he looks to force things a little bit more off the bench. He's shot a lot more threes coming off the bench and kind of doing that. And I don't necessarily think that the big guys are as comfortable playing with the other guards as they are playing with him, because he's a master at getting the basketball to big guys in positions where they can score. I praised, Baker and Lockett last week, and to be frank, Tuesday and Friday they were horrible. Lockett, as I say, 2 of 11 on Tuesday night, and more interested in talking than playing. Baker, I think he was 1 of 10 from 3 combined for Tuesday and Friday night, and obviously he's still new, so you can't expect him to just be immediately consistent. But they need that stretch 4, because at times Rogers was better. Rogers was better for them. So I came off that game, watching out for Bristol and being on spiral watch, basically. Because 5 in a row, and Andreas was pretty despondent at the end, and you can understand why. They didn't just seem to have any kind of togetherness or discipline or anything.
The other thing to me is that they clawed their way back into the game. Third quarter, they were better. They weren't brilliant, but they were better in the third quarter. They get it back down to 6, and then they just give Hamilton an open 3 in the corner to knock that down, and it's 9 instead of 6. And then they come out of the thing, and there's an alley-oop play, which eBay dunks, and then a turnover and a run back. And suddenly all that hard work is gone in 40 seconds.
Yeah, and 13 points in a 70-point game is just too many. And what I'll say about the 3 that Hamilton got, that they just screwed up a switch on the inbounds, and I think that might be because it was Baker and Baker's new. They didn't. But you can't. It's a type of mistake you can't make if you want to be a next level team. And then the wind just went out of their sails, and there wasn't much feed. There wasn't much coming back to them. It was just it just felt like watching it from 400 miles away. Just felt that they were despondent. There was a despondency about the team. When the ball goes out of bounds, they weren't running to pick each other up. They were kind of not rolled eyes, but they were kind of turn around, put your head down, walk back. And I think they need to discover a little more joie de vivre. Maybe we'll get to that in Saturday. Plymouth, however, turned the corner.
They have.
Big time. And that's absolute, and that's not without, that's even before talking about today's game. Absolute credit to the coach, to be blunt, for sticking to what he wanted to do, for identifying the weakness that they had, which was basically a more cell-sized hole at the 3 of somebody who could be aggressive and provide them with scoring and attitude with a little bit of experience. For rotating his big guys, for not compromising his defensive intent, his defensive mentality, and for coaxing better play out of particularly McGill by giving him time to settle in, and to a lesser degree, kind of a combination of Porter, Bunton, and Ubiaro, depending on whose turn it is that game. They're just they are. You can see them developing the physicality and the togetherness to join the top 3. Yeah. And I don't mean see them in the future. I mean see them doing that in front of our eyes. At this point in time, and their bench is holding up, and they're playing without Andrew Lawrence and Will Neighbour. And so having been sat watching, PJ and Ashley Hamilton on the court in Newcastle 4 weeks ago, complaining about a non-call, having got 5 games in a row. There's 2 ways you can go from there. And absolute credit to them, because they've gone the right way, and they've done it the right way, and they have a ceiling which now is higher than it was before, and it's capable of being even higher than that.
There's a reason he's almost at 1,000 games, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they've lost too many now, I think, to catch the 3 above them, but they can certainly be at the same level of them by the time we get to the playoffs.
And absolutely. Well, I think they will be before we get to the playoffs. And they have the trophy as well.
Indeed,
probably half of the trophy as well. So don't be surprised to see them in the trophy final. Yeah,
definitely. Let's move on to Saturday. Bristol again. Stop me when this sounds familiar. Flyers 30 points in the first quarter, double figure lead, give it all away in the second. Hicks a couple of threes late on, and Surrey are 4 up at halftime.
Yeah. This was a fun game. I watched this game all the way through. It was a fun game to watch because, there was a little bit more desperation to Bristol. Because there has to be. They lost 5 in a row. And also Surrey were just kind of finding themselves. With a totally different lineup, basically playing extremely small, with Walsh and Raftopoulos and Hildreth getting to play and getting to be important players, which is nice. It's nice to watch them to see how they do. Theo playing at the 4, which is a major benefit for him because it allows him to stretch teams out, and he has a quickness advantage. and can make the three. You know, they run the horn, set, he turns around, he shoots a three, bang. You know, and obviously you couldn't play those minutes where you've got Cook and Skylar White and Rickman and Richards and all those guys. He was having to be kind of shoehorned into something whereby it wasn't quite as effective. And Hicks finally took control of the team, which was nice because he's a really talented player. You know, he did well the first time he was here. Did well in Pro A Germany, North-South guard. Really,
and he's
really
obviously been frustrated. The two previous games at home before that, he's fouled out on stupid double technicals.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, that goes a little bit beyond frustrated, doesn't it? That goes into the realm of unprofessional. But the talent is there, and if he's going to be there, and if Creon's happy enough that, you know, it's a result, it's a symptom as opposed to an illness. As opposed to it's just a symptom of everybody else, and Creon's able to give him the group and say, right, okay, this is what we've got. Then he can get them wins, no question at all. But the advantage he had in playing small was noticeable. Then Bristol game went back and forwards. Again, Josh Wilshere was very aggressive down the end, made some plays for them.
It's interesting because I thought both teams struggled in the last couple of minutes, 4 minutes maybe, almost like two teams that really badly needed to win, and the pressure of that sort of took them out of what had got them to the point that they were. But he was the one guy who hit a couple of big threes. Mockford hit one as well, but also took a wrong option on a fast break once. But Wiltshire hit two really important threes.
Yeah, well, you need people who've got a calm head, and when you've got teams who have forgotten how to win, which both those teams basically had. Take away the Surrey game the night before, Cameron Hildreth won that game. Making a play. That wasn't a team winning the game. That was a player making a play. You decide if a team's winning a game, not in the last 30 seconds, but in the last 5 minutes. And as you say, it all became a bit tight. Baker stepped up, to be fair, as a pro. Baker stepped up for Bristol, made some shots as well. The other guy, just again, Lockett's too talented to play the way he has this week. I'm not sure what is going on. Mockford up and down, shoots you in, shoots you out. He's the guy you want on the court because he spaces the floor. But he has to hit. He has to hit. And I did think that Wilshire's nous, to use a Geordie word, I think. Wilshire's nous at the end was critical in helping them win that game. And even then, you know, Surrey had a shot to win, but this time, instead of, you know, the Thames Valley guys in front of him getting six, and Cameron Hildreth getting, you know, 6 feet from the rim, he had to shoot a three, which isn't his strongest suit. And I think he had Lockett's hand right up.
Lockett, it was,
Lockett's 6'5", and you know, and shooting over him is a lot different to anybody.
6'5", 4-year pro. Yeah, it's a different.
Yeah, any long 6'5", and shooting over him is very different to shooting over anybody in the NBL. So that will be great for Hildreth's development, because these are the guys he's going to be seeing when he goes to college.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to today's action, starting down in the Copper Box. London Lions 75, Plymouth Raiders 81. Lions obviously coming back from their isolation, but a big win for Plymouth. We were just talking about how they are starting to become the team that we thought they were going to be, and this was the sort of underlining statement for them. Yeah, albeit with London, you know, having not played for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that impacted, you know, some of the guys probably more than others. If you look at the numbers, Parker had no impact in the game. Dirk Williams was peripheral at best. Justin Robinson came out and played aggressively in the first half. Liggins nearly had a triple-double, but you didn't see him, you didn't feel his influence on the game the way that he didn't bestride the game. He wasn't noticeably the best player on the court during the game.
It was one of those things where I actually only noticed he nearly had a triple-double after the game.
Exactly.
I didn't feel it during the game.
Well, you don't. And the reason for that was because all of the, you know, this year, London have been up since December. London have been up and down, full of energy, full of emotion, full of aggression, you know, on a mission, almost. And in that game, it was Plymouth.
Yeah.
Plymouth, it started with Morcell, early on in the game, being aggressive, getting some hand ones, clenching his fist, running around, playing emotional. Hamilton after that, Ocherobia getting some chippies around the rim, and then eBay coming, and being, an absolute physical force. Now, there's not many guys who block Liggins,
No.
And he blocked, I think he had Ward Hibbert maybe, or somebody else at the end, he pinned him as well. And, that structure combined with McGill making shots, because that was their flaw. McGill wasn't making enough shots. So McGill made a couple of threes early, a couple of pull-up jump shots, played in rhythm in the half court. And then that aggression on the boards. Plymouth had 21 offensive boards. And that's not just the big guys. That's Marcel, that's Ubiaro, that's all those guys flying around in there. And ultimately, they just played a little bit harder than London did. And sometimes
all that said, though, when it gets to 71-71 with 6 minutes to go, I thought the Lions were going to win.
Yeah, well, London have so much talent, then you can never turn around and think that they're not going to win. But they weren't quite ready to win that game. I don't think, and when I say they played hard, it wasn't that London didn't try. They did try. Sometimes the playing harder could be a mental thing, not a physical thing. You're just not in the rhythm of what's going on. Somebody jumps on you early. And I think Nigel was commentating, and when they're down by 4 with a minute to go, and they call the timeout, and Justin comes off a double ball screen at the top, and he's wide open because no one's over there. And instead of making a play, he runs the play. So he throws it back to Dirk Williams. Dirk Williams is 30 feet from the basket. He's got Ashley Hamilton on him. It's not an advantage.
No.
Justin was in the mindset that the aggressive mindset that he needed to be in. He just turned the corner and realized, they're not guarding me. I better shine on. It's me. No, it's not. It's not Dirk. It's me. I'm going to break the play. I'm going to make the play. And then they kind of, I thought they got a bit one-on-one actually towards. They did get one-on-one, and also they settled. Yeah. Where made a couple of shots, but then he fouled out in 12 minutes. And the reason that they were settling, let's be straightforward. It might be eBay. Because eBay is still there blocking shots, and he's there. He's the only guy in the league this year. There are bigger guys than him in the league this year, but he's the only only centre in the league this year who I think teams are going to have to game plan for in relation to the way that you challenge, the way where you attack, how you do it. Because if you just let him sit in the paint there and decide that you can throw runners and layups over him like you can over the rest of the league, they're not going to be anywhere in the vicinity of the basket. No. And so that may have just got into London's head, because it's the first time that, I say London's head, some of the London guys' heads. The other thing is they were a little bit, because they got nothing out of Parker, Ward Hibbert played more. Ward Hibbert still hasn't played much. He's still rusty. And Ward Hibbert gives them a hell of a lot of energy and stuff that they needed in that game. But he also hurts their spacing, because he tends to hover in the kind of the mid-range area more and look for offensive rebounds, as opposed to Parker, who's more comfortable flaring out and getting to the three-point line. And at the end of the game, that little bit of difficulty with the spacing hurt. But you got eBay in the middle, then it's tough, because Justin can't really run his little hostage dribbles where he dribbles into the screen and roll and gets the foul line and backs down and shoots little floaters, because there's just too much space being taken. So it changes everything you do. But I love Plymouth's mentality in the game. Just loved it. I say it started with Marcel and McGill. McGill making shots and Marcel playing with so much energy at the beginning of the game that everybody else was able to feed off it. And then they've
got all the pieces coming together now. I think eBay defensively is looking like the player that we thought he was going to be. McGill, as you say, starting to make some shots, and the rest of the guys, we know what they are. So looking absolutely good. Let's move on to Glasgow 78, Leicester 97. Cloud Mix doing very well in the early stages. The game was basically over by the time the pitchers came up. William Lee, we're led to believe, scoring a lot of points in the opening stages, and Leicester 20-6 up, and that was all she wrote, really.
Yeah, same problem. I mean, Glasgow's starting point guard played 7 minutes. They didn't get any. Mpondo played 7 minutes. Jack Donnelly must be hurt. He only played, I don't know, he played 3 minutes. There's something going on there, or he's injured.
Yeah.
What I said about Glasgow and Manchester, Leicester's kryptonite potentially being Manchester's individual scorers, but Glasgow don't have them.
No.
Keeling potentially, but Glasgow's still young. They're playing in the roles of an offense. But ultimately, if the offense gets the basketball to delve 15 feet away and he's challenged by Nelson Henry, or Fraser Malcolm had his run off the 3-point line by Corey Johnson, has to shoot a 15-foot runner, or Brandon has to shoot a tough three with a hand in his face. These guys aren't efficient enough scorers to do that. To score on Leicester the way that Leicester played. Leicester, the amount of there weren't bad shots that Glasgow shot, but they were the only shot they could get. The ones that I saw in the first half before Cloud Mix came in, they were the only shots that they could get, and they were, and without stone cold shot makers to knock them down, Leicester in a comfort zone, because they result in long rebounds. Long rebounds get out and running, and Leicester's offense is as smooth an offense as there is in the league at this point in time, running through Crandall, but getting the ball inside. It's either shots in the paint, or it's 3-point shots to the shooters, or it's Gino penetrating and getting in the lane. And they are the three types of shots they shoot. And the reason they do that is because they are the most efficient shots that they're possible. And when you've got guys like Jackson and Johnson and Lee, who are comfortable inside out offensively, it was never a game. It was never a game. It was a game probably for the first 6 possessions. After that,
and we didn't see them.
I saw the first 6. After that, it disappeared. But it's kind of concerning, because it's the third time Glasgow have been beaten like that by Leicester. So you expect that you'd make some improvement, or you'd have a quarter here whereby you'd make a run, or you'd be able to find a way of, keeping it a bit closer, but maybe playing a bit more aggressive, do something. But there was nothing there.
There wasn't. Let's move on from that one. Manchester Giants 76, Sheffield Sharks 90. And again, Giants struggled to. They used all their scoring on Friday night by the looks of it. They struggled to put the ball in the basket early on, and got double figures down. And again, Sheffield were pretty comfortable after that. 2
things about this game. Firstly, Manchester's first quarter defense was as bad as I've ever seen anybody's first quarter defense. If you go back and watch Sheffield's baskets one after the other. It was the first play was just a back cut for a layup. The second play was a UCLA cut for a layup. The third play was a fake screen on the wing for a layup. There was no help defense at all. The defense improved when Ulf came in the game, but not before, and he didn't come in for about 7 minutes, because he was actually there in the middle being physical force. Brady picked up 2 ridiculous fouls, and then just ridiculous. He picked up a technical foul.
Technical as well, yeah.
Yeah, and a foul 90 feet from the basket, which Jason Swain was on commentary. He was absolutely right. And their defense was awful. Now Sheffield are the absolute opposite of Leicester in the way that they play defense, because whereas Leicester is all predicated on individual defense and making you shoot tough shots, Sheffield's defense is all predicated on collapsing into the paint. Whenever the ball goes down low, whenever somebody penetrates, 5 guys are in the paint immediately. They're all down there, and that's actually Manchester's kryptonite, because what that means is the guys who are going what they thought is one-on-one and making their pet moves and getting to their spots, are in fact met by a second player and then a third player. And then the problem Danny has is that Ulf is one of his 5 best players, but having Ulf and Brady on the court means that you've got even less space to work with the other guys. So basically, Sheffield's starting lineup was, was pretty flawless in the way that they executed, but they didn't have to execute much to get what they wanted. They weren't overly tested. They did what they had to do. So Rotino got layups, Rotino got open threes, Helms got 3. it was a clinic. But you just can't play D like that and be in a game. They spotted them a 15-point start. The game was never closer than that the rest of the way, and nor was it going to be.
No.
So yeah, credit to Sheffield. Atiba he's knocked back his bench. Callum didn't get off the bench. Joe Campbell didn't get off the bench until it was a 20-point game with 11 minutes to go. Marsden's kind of playing as the big guy in the second unit. He started Tuck and Coke together in the third quarter, but ultimately he's down to an 8-man rotation, and that's probably good for them at this point.
It is, yeah. Let's go back to the trophy. Cheshire Phoenix 77, Hemel Storm 63, and this one fascinating really, because it seemed to switch on one substitution. It was a fairly even game, and then with about, I think it was 5 minutes to go, Greg Polian sits down, and the Knicks scored 20 points in a row, and it was literally all dunks and layups. I think there was one shot. Everything else was dunks and layups.
It was, and dunks, layups, and transition dunks and layups. And unfortunately, what we saw, I think, certainly I looked at the stats at half time, and Hemel's bench had been outplayed, and probably the difficult thing for Hemel was that they were playing against a team in the BBL that isn't very deep, so they're only playing 6 or 7 players, and Matthew Bryan is new, so he wasn't playing that much, which meant that their bench was going against some BBL starters. Yeah, and they couldn't manage that, as you say, when Polian went to the bench, and what it meant was that it wasn't an unfortunate 20-year run. Hemel didn't get many looks at the basket in that time. They didn't get many good looks at the basket. They got turned over 2 or 3 times. I think they'd used both their timeouts already, and it was just a team flicking a switch. And as I say, those guys are pros playing against guys, particularly the bench guys for Hemel, who aren't pros. And that is a difference in the game, and difference in the way that you have to play. It's a different level to play against. It only takes one run. It only takes 4 minutes to blow up in a game. After that, it was fairly nondescript.
It was. So with Hemel, you got Williams and Polian, 45 points, but they took 43 shots for those 45 points, and that's 43 of 73. That's a lot of shots through 2 people. Now, that's the way the team's made up. That's what they've got to do. But it becomes a challenge.
Those guys are the pros as well.
Yeah.
It's not a criticism of anybody.
No, it isn't. No.
Ultimately, it's not a fair fight in relation to the level of training, the level of remuneration, the level of maybe not experience, but it's these teams are playing on in different contexts. So that's not a criticism of them, or indeed of the Hemel guys who played and who couldn't quite get it. I mean, they were competitive. I remember we had a game last year against Dunfermline, maybe, and it was 140 to 60 or something like that. Didn't do anything for the league, and ultimately these NBL 1 teams are competitive.
And they did get it back to 10, and then the backcourt hits a 3 each, and then NBA comes down and shows them this move, and then shows them that move, and does whatever he wants.
So I think we can probably categorise it as a pretty decent effort. In the circumstances.
And Cheshire doing what they're supposed to do.
Meant to do. Yeah.
And speaking of doing what they're meant to do, let's move to the last game of the trophy and of the evening. Derby Trailblazers 73, Solent Kestrels 101. They outscored them 2-1 in the first 12 minutes, 30-15 up. Basically, this is what Solent do every week.
Yes. I'm afraid I didn't watch it. I couldn't. I was watching 2 other games. And I did check the score to see whether I needed to watch it. There's no slight on Derby. But I know what Solent are because we had to play them last year in that final. And they're better now because they've added Olan Jackman and Andre Aerosol as well. So totally unsurprising. And in reality, they play Surrey now. And they're probably favourites to beat Surrey on the way that they've been playing. You'd like to see them maybe play one of the higher ranked teams in the BBL at this point, but You know, remember they played London. They beat London last year in the first
Yeah,
round.
they did. Yeah, they did.
It's not like, and they beat Bristol over 2 legs. So
Yeah.
who were doing well last year. So it's not like they just kind of looked their way through. I'll be interested to see if they end up playing Plymouth in the semi-finals. That'll be really interesting to see, because that would be that'll be a real change of things. Obviously, there's a few other teams who will have some thoughts about that. Surrey and maybe Cheshire as well. I think that's half, but yeah, they're going to be they're going to be tough. They're going to be focused. They're going to be motivated, and they know how to get it done. You know,
and the other thing is because it's so comfortable for them most weekends, that actually those games become the big ones in their calendar, the ones that they get up for.
And that's the thing. Yeah, we all have to remember about all the kind of the early season NBL kind of games, NBL, BBL games. You know, the teams have come into it with kind of competing with different mindsets. And it's a task of the coach. However much you say, look, these guys can play, these guys can play. You know, you have to. The players often don't believe it until they're on the court. And I'm sure that's what happened to London last year. Because you know, coming off the Christmas break, it was too late. You know, they got jumped on. It was too late.
Well, as you say, Surrey won't have that problem when they.
No, Surrey won't have that problem at all.
They will know.
And it's a South Coast. That's a South Coast thing. So, you know, there'll be and you know, we've got the Hildreth thing, because obviously he's been beaten up by Solent a few times in the last couple of years, playing for Worthing. So now he gets to go at them with a slightly better supporting cast, or with him supporting a slightly better cast. So there'll be a bit of intrigue in that game. That will be a fun game to watch. Now, whilst I didn't watch Derby, so I guarantee I will watch that. So sorry about that, Matt Shaw. Sorry about that, Matt Gaiman. If you bother to listen to this, which I'm very surprised.
Well, Matt Gaiman wasn't there either, because he's expecting a baby, so he was off doing that sort of thing. So
well, in that case, and on that note, good luck, Matthew Gaiman. Most of us have been there.
Right. I think now we're into baby talk. It's probably time to wrap it up. So
I've been going gaga for a while. Boom, boom.
So we will be back next Sunday to bring you all the latest from the British Basketball League. But for now, have a great week. See you. Goodbye.